I'm Dr. Suzanne Beeke. I'm a speech and language therapist, and I work as an academic at University College London. So I do teaching and research, and one of my areas of research is aphasia. And I have developed and tested a training program for people with aphasia and their family members to help them with their conversations after stroke and aphasia, and that's called Better Conversations with Aphasia.
Right, so perhaps you could go into a bit more detail about how it would actually work for someone who has maybe just had aphasia or just been diagnosed with aphasia. How could that help them?
So we know from research that aphasia not only affects language, so finding the right words, putting them into sentences, understanding what other people say to you, all of those things can be affected, and people have very different experiences. So they can have very severe aphasia, they can have what as speech and language therapists we would say would be quite mild aphasia. But the impact of aphasia is what you experience out in your daily life, in the community, when you talk to people. And that's what becomes difficult, having conversations, which is just is a human skill that we all develop, we all learn as children. We don't even think about it, we don't even think about the rules of conversation. But there are certain rules that we follow, and we need to have our language at our disposal to have a good conversation. And suddenly, for people with aphasia, that is difficult. And it can be quite individual, so different people with aphasia can have different problems with conversation. But some of the things that my research has shown is quite universal for people with aphasia to experience is that they can't find the words that they want, and then the conversation moves on and leaves them behind. They can't get a turn in a conversation because maybe there are lots of other speakers and it's really hard to get a conversational turn. And conversation partners can think they're helping but unwittingly do things that don't help. So they can do things like talk too much, ask too many questions, not leave enough space. Even ask questions that they already know the answer to, which is suddenly a bit more like a teacher and a pupil talking together, because the person with aphasia is put on the spot to say a particular word or find a particular sentence. So I've done research over the years actually video recording people with aphasia and their families having conversations in their own environment, at home, at the dinner table, in front of the TV. And what we've done is analysed those conversations and found out what the barriers to conversations are, what the common ones are, and also what the facilitators are to conversations, so what helps. So someone giving you time to reply can really help. And for some people with aphasia, writing a word down when they can't say it can really help. And we've taken those things we've learnt from the research into our Better Conversations with Aphasia training. So we talk to people about how conversations work, what the rules are that we all unconsciously follow. And we talk about what can go wrong when someone has aphasia. And then, as part of the training, the person with aphasia and their family member makes a video recording of themselves having a conversation. And the speech and language therapist will have a look at that and see where things are going well in the conversations, when people are using good strategies, and then maybe the slightly more challenging parts of the conversation. And then we use the video to show people very short clips of those things that are going well, the good strategies, and then the things that are more difficult. So, and then explore that with them and come up with some strategies. They come up with some strategies themselves that they want to work on.
Is it something that, with someone with aphasia, for example, if they're with someone they know, one-to-one, they can find it easier than if they're in, say they're in a shop or something like that, where you don't know anybody, you don't know the person you're talking to. Is that one of the barriers that they come up against?
It can be, yes, but it's not always the obvious people who can help or hinder the conversation. So sometimes the person you meet in the shop will be great, and they'll wait and they'll listen and they'll have some really good strategies that they've sort of unconsciously developed. And sometimes your family members will be the ones who talk over you all the time and don't give you the space. So it's not always as simple as whether it's someone you know well or not. And I think there's something about family conversations that can be, they're very, we form habits as families about how we talk to each other, and those habits can be quite hard to change. But when someone in our family has aphasia, some of those habits need to change. So sometimes families need a bit more time to get used to that idea that they might have to change their conversation as well as the person with aphasia changing.
In your training sessions then, does the person with aphasia come on their own, or do they come with somebody? Is that, well, tell me.
Yeah, it's a good question. So this type of speech and language therapy is always done with the person with aphasia and someone else that they talk to a lot. Doesn't need to be a family member. Sometimes we'll work with friends or work colleagues, but it's the person who I suppose you have a reasonable number of conversations with, so it's worth working on those conversations. Yeah.
Does that obviously that feeds into the training then, does it?
It does.
It's two-sided really.
Yes.
The person with aphasia and the person who's helping.
Yeah, and that can be really different from other types of speech and language therapy, which are just directed at the person with aphasia. So we find that we do have conversations with people before they come on the training to make sure that they're both aware that they'll both be doing work and thinking about their conversations and maybe changing the way that they talk. So it's not just focused on the person with aphasia. And that's because we know conversations aren't, they're at least a two-way thing. And sometimes, most of the time, they're more than that. They're multi-party, as we call them.
Yeah. What level with aphasia do people with aphasia deal with? Is it a certain level, or is it?
It's for anyone. Yeah, and that's the beauty of it as a training approach. It can help people with really severe aphasia, and it can also help people who maybe have more mild difficulties.
Different sessions for different people, different levels, should we say.
And the way that the reflecting on conversations, the way that's done, so the bits of video that you would show and the talk that you'd have around, what's happening in this conversation, what can you see on the video? As a speech therapist, you do that differently depending on whether someone has severe aphasia or maybe milder aphasia. And we might need to support the person with more severe aphasia to actually tell us what they think. So we might have some other communication resources on the table, pictures, pen and paper. People use their phones. So we do lots of other ways of communicating so that the person with more severe aphasia can still talk during the training and tell us what they think.
Right. So if you're talking to a speech and language therapist, in a sense, it sounds to me like they're the technical side of it, and yours is the more, shall we say, the soft. What's the word? I can't think of the word. Anyway, is it less not less technical, but the speech and language therapy, that if you go to normal speech and language therapy, it's more technical, isn't it? It's about can you read this? Can you not read this? Can you understand this?
I know what you
Whereas
mean.
your program is more soft learning, I suppose.
So it's still speech and language therapy.
Yes.
It's just a different kind of speech and
It's a
language
different
therapy. So maybe it's more focused on the psychology around
right.
the effects of aphasia, talking. It's more about your life and how you need to talk to people and which people you need to talk to and how you can problem solve the difficulties that you're having. And there are other types of speech and language therapy that are more focused, as you say, on reading something or finding the right word to name a picture. And so in an ideal world, both of those things would be available to people with aphasia, because I think they're different approaches, but they're quite complementary.
Right. And your training program, is that free?
It is. Yeah. We make it available free to people. We run it here in our communication clinic at UCL. And we run it alongside our students who are learning to be speech and language therapists. They help us to deliver this kind of training so that we're teaching the future generation how to offer it to people with aphasia as well. But the reason why we can make it free is because we do a lot of training for speech and language therapists in how to use better conversations with aphasia. And they pay for the training. So the NHS pays them to develop their clinical skills. So we use that money then to make the therapy free, which seems entirely appropriate.
Is it going to be moved out to other parts of the country, for example?
Well, we train speech and language therapists from all over the world, actually, in this training approach. And so that's the way that we can make sure that it reaches a huge amount of people, because obviously the people who come here are people who live in and around London and the southeast. But we also do this training online sometimes. So we might run it on Zoom for people who are in different parts of the country or simply aren't able physically to access a space like a clinic.
So how does somebody get in touch with you about the training and to know more about it?
Yeah, so we have, so there's two things. There's a website for our UCL Communication Clinic. So if people Google that, they will find the website. And on there is information about our intensive conversation groups. So when we run it in the clinic here, we actually run it in groups of people with aphasia and their family member or friend. We did our last group about a month or so ago, and we had 5 people with aphasia and their key conversation partner in that group. That's something we do every year because it's when the students are available to help us to run it. They're a key resource in us running it. So that's one thing people can do, Google the UCL Communication Clinic website. But we also have a Better Conversations with Aphasia website, which has broader information about our research, about the training programme, and contacts for us, because there's a group of us working in this area here.
Okay.
And we actually have developed this kind of training program for people with other types of communication difficulties. So my colleague Dr. Anna Volkmer has developed Better Conversations for people with primary progressive aphasia, which is a rare form of dementia. So we also run groups for people with that condition. And at the moment we are developing, with funding from Parkinson's UK, Better Conversations with Parkinson's. So for people with Parkinson's disease and their families.
It's the same.
Yeah,
You managed to.
Yeah, because we're all having conversations.
Yeah.
So the conversation is the bedrock of the
Yeah.
training.
It's the type of conversation,
Yeah.
the type of
Yeah, the type
condition
of
that you're
the type
talking
of
about.
difficulty in the conversation
Okay.
can change, but essentially we can use a lot of the same training techniques.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank